My guest today is Rachel Rennie, the Chief Voice Officer and founder of Frankly Right, a copywriting and brand studio for the Rebels and the Weirdos. I'm new to AI myself and have tried using it, but found it quite hard to train the tools to match my brand voice. Neither of us are experts on AI, but I've been listening to other takes on it and other podcasts, and it seemed to me like brand voice was being left out of the conversation. I wanted to chat with Rachel about AI through the lens of copywriting and brand voice. I want to be able to use these tools, but with accurate expectations and checks and balances in place to make sure we are still on brand. Since we embrace automation around here, we want to use AI to save us time without compromising on the value we're providing. I use AI to edit this podcast with it switching between the video options, and it saves me at least an hour or two per episode, so I'm ready to apply it to other parts of my business. In this episode, I chat with Rachel about how we can retain our brand voice while using the tools at our disposal. I'll include some links in the show notes for more technical resources if this inspires you to learn more about AI. Welcome to the podcast, Rachel. It's so good to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So Rachel was on the podcast before. She's been on to talk about brand voice before on season 2, episode 15, if you want to go back and listen to that. But it is from a couple of years ago. So why don't you tell us who you are, Rachel, and all about your business?
So I'm Rachel. I am the CVO and founder of Frankly Right. So it's just me at the moment. I started with myself, had a small agency, and now I'm back to just being me. So CVO is a bit of a weird title when you're just looking after yourself, but I've got growth in mind. So I am a brand strategist and a copywriter, and I work primarily with e-com and product-based businesses, all digital marketing, some print, some ready for print, but mostly websites, social media, blogs, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, awesome. So just to kind of set the scene, why don't you tell us kind of like what brand voice is?
In a nutshell, it's one of those terms that I'm like, it's the voice of your brand. It is what it says it is. So your brand voice takes your brand values, your target audience, all the things that you kind of want to build your brand on. We turn that into a brand personality. And then from there, your brand voice is simply how that personality comes across, in written communications. A really good way to think of it is if your brand is a person, when you walk into a room, your brand personality is always going to be the same, but you have different aspects of yourself, and your brand voice is going to be consistent, but it depends on who you were talking to and what you were saying. So you're still you. You walk into a room, you're you. Your brand is still your brand, and then your voice just encapsulates your personality as a brand.
That makes perfect sense because it's like I'm still myself, but if I'm talking to my grandmother, I might be talking slightly different to if I'm talking to my brother or my friend or a client or whatever. So yeah, just bringing that into business. And the reason why I wanted to have you back was to talk about brand voice in the times of like AI and outsourcing, because I think that's being left out of a lot of conversations. We have all of these like chat GPT and things that you can really easily be like, please write me a 500-word blog post about XYZ. And then it spits you out this thing that sounds kind of like a professor is saying it and all of those things. And so I mean, ChatGPT, it's in the name. You meant to chat with it to get it to your brand voice. But yeah, just to kind of like break down how people can keep their brand voice while they're doing all of these things, and whether they're outsourcing to AI, a software, or whether it's a person that they're outsourcing to. There's still kind of a lot of crossover. So even for those listeners who are like, I'm staying away from AI for now, this can still be really relevant for them. So just kind of to chat about how people can avoid sounding really like flat, boring, like a cardboard cutout, boring version of themselves. So where can people actually like start with that in the sense of where they're trying to retain it and keep it molded even when other people are having their input?
Yeah, so I always start with the fact that AI can be creative, which is a little bit of a like lots of creatives are like, it's never going to be creative. But if you think about creativity, any creative thing that we make has been inspired by something else. even if you go back to artists who, came up with a certain style of painting by themselves, they were inspired by something. So for all of humanity, creativity has been inspired by something. Therefore, I personally think that AI has the ability to be creative because they can learn from the past, um, and can mold something together. But it's that molding, and that joining together of different fragments, that's where humans need to be part of that element, because we pull together fragments and then we add a little something else, because obviously AI has to learn from things. They don't have that spark of original thought. There are a lot of creatives out there who call themselves creatives, not anyone I know, but who genuinely follow a formula like AI does or AI could do to show creativity. But the really good creative stuff comes from a little spark of original thought. So on that note, you can use AI to have a level of creativity, to add some creativity into your brand. Maybe it will think of an idea that you haven't thought of, but you are still going to need to add that human element, because otherwise it's literally impossible for AI to have an original thought. So that's where we're at with in terms of that creative element of branding.
With it being that you need to bring the original thought to it, therefore you need to prompt it in certain ways to get results that are unique to you, because the more generic the input you put, the more generic the output's going to be. It does have its flaws, and I actually looked up the flaws of the ChatGPT model, and it says ChatGPT sometimes writes plausible sounding but incorrect or nonsensical answers, which is the thing of like, just because you're using a tool still means that you are responsible for how you use it, what you publish based on what it gives you, and also like fact checking it to make sure that it's, citing sources instead of just making them up from something that like sounds good. Um, and then also making sure that everything is like compliant, just like you would in any other piece of writing. It also says that it is sensitive to tweaks to the input phrasing or attempting the same prompt multiple times, which is basically like how you prompt it with very slight variations is how it will operate. Also, they're trying to make it not give the exact same output to multiple people. So if you put in the exact input twice, it'll try to not give you the same. Also, it's trying to figure out what you want, so it's trying something else.
So the word you've used there is tool. And that's exactly what it is. It is a fantastic tool for people to create something. That's exactly what it is. It's a
Yeah,
tool.
exactly. And going back to that thing of the artist, and I covered this a little bit in a podcast episode previously in the season about like Steal Like an Artist, the book by Austin Kleon. And like people were worried about photography when that first came out and thinking like, well, painting is now dead because people can now just take a photograph of that mountain. But of course, the expression through that painting, it's yes, there are like hyper realistic painters out there, but a lot of people who paint, it doesn't look like a photograph, like it's like their creative take on it as well. So I can see how that would be different. Also, the model is often excessively verbose and overuses certain phrases, such as restating that it's a language model trained by OpenAI. And part of that is because it wants to like remind you that it's just a tool, that it's not something that you can just like copy paste and use in a court case like someone tried to do. Where it's a tool that you can use, but that it isn't it's not without its flaws. AI has been built and taught by humans, and humans have flaws, so therefore it does. Just like, photography did in its first instances and even still does a little bit now, has its flaws of like, certain skin colors or things like that. It just worked differently because it was originally created for a certain subset of people. Um, And also it says, ideally, the model would ask clarifying questions when the user provided an ambiguous query. Instead, our current models usually guess what the user intended, which obviously isn't great. That is not like working with a human who would, I would hope, ask a clarifying question. It just spits you out something and then assumes that you will correct it, which means that you have to correct it. And then in general, it can often be a little bit sexist, a little bit biased in certain ways. And so, assuming you don't want to be like that, you have to correct it. You have to either make changes or prompt it to adjust itself. And so, being set in those brand values is incredibly important in how you prompt it and also how you kind of like review what it gives you. Are you just allowing that as like, yep, tick, done, that blog post is good enough? Or are you going through it and checking it as you would an employee or someone like that, where you're checking their work,
Yeah.
knowing that they aren't, you know, using it as a tool and not treating it like it's an expert lawyer or something, for example.
Just purely from a marketing perspective, the idea is to marry your brand voice and your audience's pain points and your, point of difference, your unique value proposition. The idea is to marry those two together and then to get one step ahead, because that's what marketing is. It is getting one step ahead of your audience and telling them what they need before they kind of know what it is that they need. Um, and AI can't do that because they aren't thinking one step ahead. They are learning information.
What I also find really interesting about it is that because you have to prompt it, it's going solely based off of what you want. So, like, being specific about the length of content that you want, potentially what platform it's on, what tone, what kind of points you want it to make. You actually have to be really specific. And the way that I think of AI is, especially from a copywriting perspective, is to treat it as specifically as you would brief a photographer or a brand designer or anything like that. So when you're thinking of how you might, say, brief even like an AI image tool where it's going to output an image, you'd have to be incredibly specific to get exactly what you want. Like I've seen images of like a French bulldog with a chain around its neck in Times Square with like XYZ ads running behind it. It's a busy street. Like it would need to be way more detailed than that to get exactly what you wanted. Like you've got to give it really specific parameters to give it what you want. And it has to be the same for copywriting. Because otherwise you are just going to get like the default version for anything
Yeah.
that you don't state.
Yeah, so your brand, and I mean, when we build a brand voice for someone, it's quite a detailed document. It gives a lot of say this, don't say this is your brand voice, this is your personality. The idea is that you can then give that to somebody as a tool to use. However, that person still needs training in how to use that tool. It's detailed enough that you could give it particularly to the owner of the business. But even then, if they're not a copywriter, that implementation is entirely up to the person. It actually takes a lot of training. So when we hand brand Bibles over to businesses, we quite often train their social media manager or talk with their junior copywriter or whoever is implementing that brand voice just to make sure that they can really hone it in. And with a person, that takes time.
Yeah.
Even internally, when we're running as an agency, we can complete a brand voice for a client and have someone in our team implement it. That still takes back and forth, even with a trained copywriter, to talk with the brand strategist and refine the writing. That takes time. They'll get it eventually because I only work with really smart people, but it still takes time, and they are people and they are professionals at what they do.
Yes.
Always takes training. It always takes time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think tone of voice and the language that these tools use are very different to even how like most humans would sound like in a normal conversation. And you tell them you want something to be conversational and it's like it interprets it in a completely different way than you would assume conversational. How do you break down with your clients beyond just like a tone of like conversational, funny, witty? How do you help them turn that into like actual words to use?
Yeah, so the first thing that we do personally is provide like a word bank, a say this, say that example, a lot of rules. So we give our clients lots of rules too, which sounds really mean, but all of these things add up together um, to combine into plus your brand personality, plus your brand voice prompts, plus who you are as a brand, your core values, plus what your target audience wants to actually hear. All of that combined together with examples, with training, becomes this tone that you would use. But again, still needs prompts, still needs a lot of help. Where our brand voice documents come in really handy, particularly if you are a business owner who needs to launch something or who knows their business inside out. But again, when they're giving it to someone else, it usually needs they need training to get that tone of voice. Your brand is a personality. When we are writing for it and when we are creating for it, we create a person in our head, not a person as a target audience persona, but your brand just becomes becomes a person. And to understand what that person is like, you really have to be able to live them, breathe them, become them, because we're a bunch of creative weirdos. And AI just can't do that yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too sometimes I've sat down and I've had a back and forth with ChatGPT to write either like a blog post, which I found it is um a little too far off doing it like that even from an outline that I'm providing. What I found it really useful for is the really small things. So like giving me ideas on 20 different ways that I could say XYZ. And then I pick and choose between them of like, oh, I like that phrasing or whatnot. And then sometimes I end up with something that it's none of the outputs that it's given me, but it's also a lot better, in my opinion, than what I came up with organically on my own. And it's kind of like using it as a sounding board in a way where, like, if I had a team of 5 people, I could get us all together and we'd all sit around a whiteboard and come up with all of these words. And with our different vocabularies and feeding off of each other, we might come up with something similar. But it allows me to do that in a short amount of time and it's just me. So it's not like I'm like getting rid of a team to do XYZ with AI. It's like rather than me sit here for potentially 20 minutes racking my brain about what I'm going to do, it just gives me a few prompts and ideas.
And if you're not a copywriter, um, we have a little bit of a thesaurus in our brain, but we use thesauruses all the time. I love using Pinterest to see a visual representation, and then I try and like describe that. So I'm using all these other tools regardless. So ChatGPT or whatever AI just becomes one of those tools. It's like an inspiration. Let's discuss it. Let's look at a Pinterest board. Let's open a thesaurus and pick the best word or the best phrase that allows me to say what I want. And then, like you said, I might jump on thesaurus, grab a bunch of words, put them down in front of me. None of them are right yet. But then it gives me that little spark to go, I know what I need. So we do this anyway. It's just in one place.
Yeah. And even with a thesaurus, it's not like going to the thesaurus, putting in a word and picking just whatever the first thing it shoots out at you is. You might look at the 10 words that it gives you, then maybe look at a few synonyms for a couple of those. Um, English is weird. So there's often like one word can mean multiple different things. So you're kind of like muddling around in that. But I think the way that we approach these other tools is the way that we could approach AI, is just kind of like using it as a tool to be creative and dabble around with a few things, but not necessarily just like letting it make all of our decisions for us.
Yeah, copywriting is very specific, especially conversion-based copywriting or I mean any copywriting. If you're doing a billboard, you've got what, how many words? Maybe 10 to get your point across. That's why I have a job. But like, there is every word is weighted. So if you put something into AI and it's going to spit something out at you, you then have to go through and figure out which words you need to weight. Do you need to change any? Do you need to swap any? Um, yeah, so it's that tool that you need, but it just doesn't have that beautiful human element that we need.
Yeah, even the connotations of different words in different countries, and that's why sometimes, like, a word can mean something very different in the US as it does to the UK and vice versa. So even that is really important as well, but yeah, just using it for what it really is instead of like, I could lay off half of my team and do this, which is sometimes what we're hearing about, like, certain, like, journalism situations or whatever, where teams are being shrunk so that the remaining team can just work with these tools. I'm more of a let's see how we can use this tool to do more and make things more easeful for business owners and small marketing teams so that they can do more. So rather than, maybe if you are working with a copywriter and they're using one of these tools, they may be able to do something a little bit quicker. But if you work with them on that, maybe they can train tools for you so that they take a lot of that work in the short term off of you, but then in the long term, instead of doing 3 blog posts for you a month, they're able to do 5, for example. Um, and so that you are, as a business, able to do more and scale with that person. Now, of course, they now have an extra skill set, so you need to pay them for that skill set. So it's not necessarily that you just pay them for less hours now. Their rate should, as with any skill, go up. So I think it's just approaching things in a way where it's fair for everyone, but also not over assuming the abilities of any one tool.
A big part of what you are paying a copywriter for or what paying someone on your team for is the fact that they have the ability to articulate what your audience needs, and they can articulate that in two ways. One is in the way that your audience is already saying it, which is where AI comes in handy because it could be trawl this. What are the most common words people are using here, 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 and here? And the other thing that copywriters need to do is they need to articulate what your audience needs in words that they don't even know how to express yet. So it's using the words that your audience are already using, and you're articulating it in a way that makes them feel like you know them better than they even know themselves. And that's something that I don't think that AI can do. Definitely not for a long time, because it's knowing the human psyche on that deep level. It's understanding everything again about your brand, everything about your audience, taking what they're saying and then going, you know what? I can actually say it better for you. I can hit that pain point of what you actually need better for you, and I can deliver the solution. So when it comes to like building a brand voice and a brand personality, not just, writing blogs and things like that, but that I can say it better for you, it needs a human to do that.
Yeah. Especially when it's that strategic portion of that there's so much context, there's so much like this moment where obviously AI is a little bit behind, that comes into it of like this is how we are moving things ahead in the future and therefore it's slightly behind as well. Yeah. Also I have found that they are very quick, these tools are very quick to claim knowledge of certain things. So like as we record this, things might have changed by the time this episode comes out, but as we're recording this, it's like day what, like 16 of threads, like very early. And I was using Jasper AI yesterday as kind of like a way of like, how is this tool working for people? And it's already, you can put in a template for threads. And I'm like, wait, what? So I put in a prompt. It gave me the longest thread I've ever seen in my life. It was like obviously within whatever word count it gives you, but like no one's writing threads that long to like start a conversation. And then Jasper allows you to change the tone, change the length, all of these things to like adapt it through its tools. And very quickly we got through a few prompts and all of a sudden it was giving me hashtags, which as of today don't work on Threads. So there's obviously a few of those things where it's making certain assumptions and leaps where you as the business owner and you as the copywriter will know that that's not, correct, because you have the context of the platform, you're using the platform, and it's just not there yet. They might have added hashtags by the time this episode goes live, but they definitely don't work right now. So yeah, it's those kind of things too where like maybe there are formats of blog posts that it's copying, but is that how you want your brand to show up? Like, if you think of blog posts 8 years ago, there was a lot of like keyword stuffing and they weren't that readable. A lot of the blog posts that were ranking really highly were ones that had like the most outrageous keyword stuffed headings that didn't really attract people, but Google has adapted its
Yeah.
algorithms. And I think some of these tools are just like they're in that era.
Google wants to, be as advanced as people are in terms of how people read websites. And there's just no way. I mean, you've obviously tried to write a blog. I've tried to get a blog from ChatGPT, but it might just be my expertise, my skills. I could knock a blog post out in 1/10 of the time it would take me to input into ChatGPT, create a format that I like, go back, edit it. And yeah, if you're writing for your business or you're training a junior copywriter, whatever you might be doing, you're just going to be so much faster. Definitely at
Yeah.
this point. And especially knowing, hey, Google's going to read it like this. My audience are going to read it like that. It's all the same stuff repeated, regardless of what kind of format you're trying to write copy for.
It might be able to summarize certain things, but is it going to create content that's actually right for that? I also put into Jasper my website and it gave me a brand voice summary. It didn't give me all of the things like the word bank and all of these things. So ultimately, even when I applied this brand voice to a lot of context, it was still very far off the actual brand voice. But it said the style guide emphasizes an informative, professional, and confident tone, focusing on sustainable marketing, business growth, and practical strategies, while incorporating interactive elements, resource optimization, realistic goal setting, data driven decisions, collaboration, and platform specific content. Technically, it's not wrong, but also what?
Yeah. It's not wrong, but how am I supposed to do how am I supposed to do that? Okay.
A lot of that list was topics. It actually had nothing to do with brand voice. So, like, resource optimization. Well, that's like, what would the prompt be that I put in? It wouldn't necessarily be that the output would be a certain language. So, like, to me, a brand voice, and this was it trying to build a brand voice, to me, it's, tone, words, phrasing, like how I would deliver something. Whereas this is talking about, kind of what my business and website talks about rather than it is how it talks about it.
Yeah. If you think of that person walking into the room, they've now got a big list of topics and they know they need to be, what were some of your words? Like, you know,
Data driven decisions, realistic goal setting, resource optimization.
so you're walking to a room, you're like, I'm going to talk about realistic goal things. You don't know how you're going to talk about that. It's just
Yeah.
like it's a robot now standing in a room trying to talk about these
Yeah.
types of things. It's
Yeah.
just got a long, long way to go. I've obviously tried it with the website, and with our website, like write me a blog, gather the tone from franklyright.co.nz, write me a blog in that tone about SEO. And it's just like, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And they'll pick up certain parts of my website, but then it interprets, it's like, oh, okay, it's a bit sarcastic. And then how does it interpret that sarcasm is in a way that Frankly Right would never write. But it's technically right. It's sarcastic. That's it.
Yeah. Exactly. Also, I feel like sarcasm is different in many countries. Sarcasm is different for many types of people. Yeah, totally. So, yeah, what I'm kind of thinking and how I'm thinking about AI is that I'm treating it as if it is like quite a junior staff member. It is a tool. I use it for very small certain things, but I have very realistic expectations of what I can get out of it so that I'm not thinking that it's great and just plonking it on my website because it's not.
I've been thinking of it in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
I think of it as an intern who's decided on their major but hasn't quite started first year of uni yet. Bless,
Yeah.
potential, is going to try hard, but you have to give them everything on a platter and again be realistic. What they're going to give you is going to be nowhere near what you actually need.
Yeah. Because they lack the context.
They lack the context and they lack that. What are the actual values? What's my experience? They don't have it.
I also would say, as well as like setting those realistic expectations, it's kind of like, how can you use it in your business? So I'm thinking of it as those like titles, points, rewording, rephrasing things that I'm saying. Um, and thinking, how can I use this in a certain way? Some of the tools that are out there are also an SEO tool, or they're also something else. So they are helping you to line those things up. But we all know from like random WordPress plugins when it's like trying to give you all the ticks for SEO, like realistic, all it's doing is like spotting a keyword that you've inputted and being like, yes, that's on the page enough times. Yes, it's in the alt text and the H1 heading and the whatever else. So it's kind of like having that checklist for yourself. The checklist is only as it's just a checklist. It's not everything. So let's talk about all of the fears that we have with AI. For me, I will go right off the bat that a lot of the things that even now, like 5 years ago, that I used to do for my clients, I no longer do for them because Google Ads has changed a little bit. The collective understanding of certain things has changed a little bit. And as that has evolved, in parts of it, I have become more of a strategist than I have a doer for a lot of my clients. So it'll be really interesting to see over the next few years how that changes, and some of that brings up some fears. Um, how do you think this will evolve things over the next few years? Like what is on the horizon that you're a little concerned about?
Oh, 100% the same, in terms of, like, I think every copywriter is secretly scared of their job being taken. Same for graphic designers, website builders. I had to write some code a couple of months ago for a platform, and it works perfectly. And someone I know who is a coder was like, when did it start doing this? I think everyone's scared of that. But again, we've moved more into strategy. We do a lot more branding now. Obviously, it's not there for copywriting yet, but that fear of, is it going to take our jobs? No, because we always adapt and we always evolve. Humans are just natural adapters. If it's going to write blogs exceptionally well, great. What's the strategy behind those blogs? And I'm the same, with SEO tools. They have come a long way, even in the last 4 years that I've been using them. SEMrush, I use that all the time. It now helps me plan content. It can spit blogs out. I haven't necessarily done that. But if a client wants that, they're still paying me to put that all together for them, spit out the blog post, decide on the topic, just follow that process of a strategy. And then I also still need to analyze the effectiveness of it. So that is something that I mean, like, touch wood, but I don't see AI ever being able to like analyze how effective something is from a marketing point of view, because we're always doing one step ahead.
Yeah.
So we're always going to evolve. Fingers crossed it doesn't take our jobs. Sometimes we read something as copywriters, you go, definitely AI, like, what the heck is that? And then sometimes we go, oh my God, AI wrote that. Like, small panic, and then we adjust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And one of the other things that I remembered what I was going to talk about before is taste, because as all of these tools have evolved and all of the ways in which people use them has evolved, our expectations have changed, and a lot of that is through taste. I think when you look at, say, like a podcast editing tool where it can automatically cross between the people who are talking, I use one of those tools, but it's not at the stage where it's fully correct. So I am constantly making adjustments. I'm still editing the podcast. It maybe saves me an hour, but it allows me to spend that hour elsewhere. And so theoretically, I could do something to make my podcast episodes better in that time. Generally, it's more just that I sleep more. But how we all evolve, I think, will mostly be through taste. Of You still need that human element, that human that's gonna go, I don't know about this part. Like, when you think of, I don't edit the podcast down that excessively, but you think of these people who do these like 3-4 hour interviews and then cut them down to an hour. A human has to decide which parts of the interview were the most interesting. Um, it's gonna take a lot for AI to do that. And so when I look at my job and I'm like, is my job and my role and the need for these clients that I have going to dry up? Probably not. And so I think of how these when I'm reflecting on it, I like to think of other businesses and how they've been affected. So like changes in journalism have had effects. Some of those have been negative. Some of those have been because of like greed or certain decisions that have been made. Um, it's not, like, I don't see podcast editing and sound engineering and things like that going away just because there are these accessible tools, because there are always those skill sets that people don't just have magically. Um, at a certain point, they started teaching kids in school how to code, but it was like a very small amount of code. Um, it's not like they've all become software developers or programmers or have this base knowledge and are able to do everything. And also it's not that different to like how people learned how to do stuff with code with MySpace. How they were like, well, I'm going to change my colors and formats and make a song work or whatever. Um, they learned a lot of that stuff through MySpace, but it's not like everyone just suddenly, like every single person across the whole planet kind of gained this expertise. Um, I also am what I'm excited about AI is for all of the people who have either ADHD like myself or dyslexia, or maybe they have issues maybe like with their eyes or anything like that, how these tools can be built to help them. A lot of the ones that I'm interfacing with are the ones that are going to help those kind of things versus like, say a physical need that people have. But that's what I'm excited about, is how will it help other people with these tiny little things that, we don't necessarily think of, but that they'd be super helpful for other people. Um, so for me, there's more excitement.
I've never thought of that before. I've never thought of that use in terms of accessibility, and that's so true. Like, I'm like, what can I think of now? I mean, even with ADHD, because same, can it make me a list? Can it make me a list of blogs, that maybe I didn't have the attention span to sit and think and do, but I know I need to get it done, and then I can add my human element. But I mean, I think there's a lot of people with ADHD now who know they need that a shot of dopamine or whatever. They need something to like get their brain moving. Now, we've got a list made for us, so we're already feeling good. Like we tick something off, and then we're going to be able to get our blog post done. I love that. I never thought of it in terms of accessibility before.
Yeah. And so I think if we think of all of the things that it could do me out of a job on, I'm not necessarily sad about those things, because for the near future, it's a lot of the things that are like admin and maybe like a little bit boring anyway. A lot of that is also automation. It's only like ever so slightly AI. But it's like invoice reminders that go out for my clients. Like I don't have to think about it. It just gets done. That's handy. Um, spell check and using certain apps that might like read a page to you. They use AI in very small amounts, but the amount that it does use is really intelligent in helping me do what I need to do better. So like a tool that can automatically skip over ads and alt text and buttons, because it's a tool that's not for people who are blind. So it's just helping me like speed read this page, but I can actually see the images. Um, helping to prioritize, AI that can look at my calendar and help me to not feel overwhelmed, because I suffer from a lot of time blindness. And so therefore, if it can like correct me, great. Um, it's those little things that I'm excited about, and if anything, I just like that it's a tool that I can use to help me work with more clients, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. Love it.
From that taste element, because I think when people hire a copywriter, how do they know which are the good ones and which are the not so great ones? What factors can they look at? How do they, if they themselves aren't a great copywriter or a brand voice, how can they either give feedback or select a copywriter or brand voice strategist based off of like maybe not an inherent taste that they have?
Yeah, so a big point of choosing a copywriter in particular and a brand strategist is to look at the kind of work that they do, and what you naturally like. I liken it to choosing a tattoo artist. They're obviously great drawers and artists, but I don't want to take a hyper realistic, tattoo idea to somebody like line drawings or sketch kind of things. They might be able to do it, but it's not going to be particularly what you want. That's how I always, recommend people choose copywriters. If somebody comes to me from a referral and immediately starts going, what do you do? Can you do this? Can you do that? That is already probably not going to be a good fit because we are creatives, we have a style, we need someone who's going to go with that style. There are copywriters out there who say that they can work with any kind of style. 100% go for it, babe. But it's not going to be really good. So choose your copywriter and your brand strategist as you would choose an artist, because we annoyingly are very creative. If you don't love all of their previous work, but there are bits that stand out to you that you really do like, you just say, I really like the work you did on this. Can you pick that vibe up for me? And then just as a little example for myself, we worked with a lawyer for quite a few years. She's still a client of ours. I had a doctor come to me and said that she wouldn't have normally chosen me, but she saw the referral and liked the work I had done for the lawyer. So even in that case, she looked at my Instagram and went, what? But she'd seen an element of my work that she really liked. And when she came to me and asked if I could, not replicate, but dive into that for a medical professional, I said yes, because we had that discussion about, that slightly rebellious tone. I mean, the lawyer we work with is not a typical lawyer. She's got this rebellious kind of innate sense to her. And same for this medical professional. It doesn't mean that they have a rebellious brand, like some of the product work that we have done, but there is that element to it. So your taste, you might need to do a little bit of digging, but if you think of them as they are an artist and they are always going to throw something out that sounds like their own work, just in a really nuanced way for you. But yeah, we do what we do and we do it really well. And, if you're a service-based business and you want plain and a little bit boring, don't come to me, because I'm going to put my heart and soul into it. And it's going to be super creative and you might not like it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super fair. And I also think with taste, it is acquired. And so therefore they should look around and look at what other people are doing. I think when people are like, I'm going to start a podcast, I do genuinely think that they should go on to, Apple Podcasts or whatever, look at a whole bunch of different shows, check out their formats, and then take some of the context of the industry in mind so that they can have their own taste and expectations of themselves, so that you don't want to just copy somebody else's style, but you want to have those multiple influences and then put your own spin on it. Back to what we were talking about before. Rather than, well, I really like this one podcaster, so I'm going to try and emulate that as much as humanly possible, because ultimately we do need to stand out and be different. So you want to use all of these influences, but not just like copy one.
And on that topic of taste, there is one thing that we say to all of our clients. We are not writing for them. We are writing for your target audience. So when it comes to copy in particular, if someone wants to really nitpick a sentence on the website, which happens, it can take like an hour of work for them to kind of get to grips with one sentence. I always say immediately, do you not like this? Or do you think your audience will not relate to it? And if it is option A, then does it actually need to change? Because you're not going to like all of your copy because it's not for you. And you're not going to like all your marketing because it's not for you. You can have a say in that initial taste, but the end result, it's not for you. People are always like, I'm going to buy my product. I'm like, well, you're actually not going to buy your product because you have already seen it, created it, it's out in the world. You're actually not your target audience anymore for your product. If someone else made it, you would buy it, but you're not actually going to buy your own. So it's very nuanced, but it's that like, it is your taste, but it's your audience's taste more than it is yours.
And also you have your own biases because you are the business owner, especially if you've made the product yourself. Specifically, like you've gone through all the research and development, you know all of the things. So you really have to make sure that those points are being made on the website as well, because otherwise you are making certain assumptions based off things that you know that aren't actually on the website. So working with that external party can really help you get those right.
Because you know all of the information for that reason as well, but also you know it all, so you're not actually going to buy your product. Not because the information you know is negative, but because you've already absorbed all that information into your brain. So yeah, what it says on the packaging, it's not for you, babes.
Yeah. Well, this was really great. I think we've covered that angle of AI that I really wanted to, of like making sure that brand voice doesn't get left out of the conversation. And yeah, this has been really, really helpful to me to think of like, okay, but how am I working on my own taste and setting my own expectations for how I use these tools? Because if I'm going to use them, I need to use them properly and make sure that I'm, keeping them in line.
It's a tool you have to whip into shape.
So let's wrap it up with some quick fire. Who inspires you in business?
Oh, honestly, it's my nearest and dearest business. I'm going to say girlies, which sounds very anti-feminist, but I mean, Meg's the brand. She's a brand strategist. Laura from Tide Studio, Lisa from Wild Mustard, Shay from Idyllic. All my besties, they are my inspiration, and I hope that I inspire them a little bit too. I try not to look too far beyond because imposter syndrome, bloody love it. So they're my inspiration. I'm like, if they think what I'm doing is great, then I feel great.
Yeah. No, I love that. What creative pursuit are you enjoying or feeling drawn to right now in your work or personal life?
So personal life, every writer says this, but I'm trying to write a novel. I have been super inspired by Amy. I hope somehow we can put these details in. She's just written a book about her experiences in church and with a youth pastor who was less than ideal person. She actually interviewed me for that because I have also had a very similar traumatic church experience with a dirty youth pastor. So that's a book that I've always wanted to write. I have read hers. It's beautiful. It is a completely different direction to what I would take it. Mine would lean a lot more into a thriller vibe. So with the inspiration of her book getting published, she has worked years and years on it. It has given me a kick up the bum to get mine going. So I'm writing a novel because I'm a writer and that's what we all do, apparently.
That's amazing. I'm so looking forward to seeing that one day. That'll be cool. What is your favorite place on the internet right now?
I have said this before, but it's bloody TikTok because that algorithm, like we're talking about AI, that algorithm knows me better than I know myself. And I like that. Again, I'm a human. I've adapted to it. I'm like, great, show me all the things that I would love in a 10-minute span. So TikTok's my go-to.
Yeah, I love that. It inspires me so much, and then I have to, like, take a step back to, like, process those thoughts as well. So I have it, like, hidden in the section you have to search for on your phone. But yes, I love TikTok. What are you looking forward to the most in the next year of business?
Well, I had a studio.
Mhm.
It wasn't maintainable for me because of my mental health and 2 high needs health children. It happened all at once last year, so I closed the studio down and just went back to being myself. However, not saying never say never to a studio, but there is now a new chance for Frankly Right to take a different growth direction. And now that I've got it back to me, stable, stabilized, beautiful, there is a new growth for Frankly Right that I perhaps didn't think of before. So that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I love that. And what are you looking forward to the most in the offline world in the next year?
What is my offline world? I think in terms of frankly growing, just having, oh, this is so stereotypical mum bullshit, but just having that extra time with my kids. My little boy is going to be 5 at the end of next year, and I actually work less hours now just to grab that extra time with him. So I'm just going to be absorbing all that yummy little preschool time. And my big girl is almost a teenager. She will be a teenager next year. So if I can get all of that, they're still little children, I'll be happy.
Oh, that's amazing. Cool. And the big question, if someone is listening to this episode and they want to grow their own business, what is the one thing you recommend they do or evaluate next?
Strategy. Like, what are your base foundations? What is your strategy going to be? Obviously, I'm a marketer, so I'm going to say, what's your marketing strategy? But then when we develop a brand strategy for someone, the very first thing we do is talk about their values and their why, which is a bit of an overused phrase, but it's so important. So even if we're just building out a brand voice, we spend a long part of our strategy sessions talking about values and why. So you need to nail those down for a reason. If you don't have them, your end results of your business growth in a year's time, they're not going to feel right, and you're going to have to start all over again. So get your why, get your values sorted.
Yeah, I love that. That's so accurate. And everything that I am doing on an annual basis is making sure that I'm aligned with my ultimate goals. So I think that's really great for everyone. But thank you for joining me. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's always good to have a good chat,
Yeah.
good brand new chat.
Yes. Yes. As much as we may like to use the tools, we still need to make sure that they are guiding us in the right direction. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Hive podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend or on Instagram and tag me at Honeypot Digital. To find out more about Honeypot Digital and the work I do, or to find more episodes of the podcast and handy tips for small businesses marketing online, head to honeypotdigital.com.